Caught my wife cheating thanks to a nosy neighbor, then I came face to face with her lover. Hi Reddit, I'm Todd. I've been married to my wife Ellen, for almost 12 years now. We have two beautiful 9-year-old twin daughters, Chloe and Casey. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where everyone pretty much keeps to themselves, except for our neighbor, Hamilton. Hamilton's the type of guy who notices every detail about everyone's business. He might be a little nosy, but in the end, he was the one who exposed the truth I never expected. Let's get one thing straight, I never thought I'd be here, sharing the mess of my life online. But here I am, trying to make sense of the chaos that's turned my marriage and life upside down. A few months ago, Ellen started working part-time. I'm the primary breadwinner, so her job was more for keeping herself busy than anything else. At first I thought it was great that she had a bit of independence and space to explore her own interests. We have the kind of marriage where I want her to feel fulfilled, even if that means taking a step back to let her do her own thing. But that space turned into something else. She started spending a lot more time at the gym and soon struck up a friendship with her gym instructor, Nicholas. I trusted her, why wouldn't I? She was my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. But my trust was misplaced. Hamilton, our nosy neighbor, had been watching Ellen for weeks. I had no idea he'd been observing so closely. I mean, he's always in everyone's business, but I never thought he'd dig so deep. At a recent HOA meeting, Ellen complained about the mess in Hamilton's yard, pushing the issue more than anyone else. She got under his skin, and I guess that's when he decided it was time to speak up. After the meeting, Hamilton pulled me aside, saying he needed to tell me something important. At first, I thought he was going to gripe about Ellen's yard comments. Instead, he dropped a bombshell. He'd noticed a man, Nicholas, the gym instructor, coming over to our house whenever I was at work, and the kids were at school. My first thought, Hamilton was pulling my leg. But then he described Nicholas in detail, and I felt my blood turn cold. When I got home, I tried to keep calm. Ellen and I went about our evening routine with the girls, but once they were in bed I couldn't hold back any longer. I confronted her, demanding her phone. She was furious, accusing me of not trusting her. The argument grew louder, and soon our daughters came out of their rooms, scared and confused. I took a deep breath, set the girls back to bed and apologized, telling them that mommy and daddy just had a little disagreement. Afterwards, Ellen handed me her phone, with a smug look as if to say, "See, I have nothing to hide." I wasn't stupid though, I knew any incriminating messages were probably deleted. So I downloaded an app called DroidKit, hoping to retrieve whatever she'd erased. It worked. I recovered messages from Nicholas. All the lies and deceit were right there, plain as day. I looked up at Ellen, who had that same smug smile, until she saw my expression. Then her face dropped. I held up the phone saying, "Really, Ellen? After everything we've been through?" She stammered, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. I told her to give me every single detail, when, where and how it happened. And to my surprise, she admitted it. She said she felt trapped, suffocated by her responsibilities as a wife and mother, and Nicholas made her feel alive again. That's when I realized I was just staring at her, numb, unable to respond. I got up and went to bed, while she followed, begging me to forgive her. Finally, I asked her, "Were you ever going to tell me?" After a long pause she said, "Yes." "Then why did Hamilton have to?" I asked. Silence. That was my answer. I went to bed, unwilling to sleep on the couch or check into a hotel. This was my bed, my home. She had already taken so much from me, I wasn't giving up my space too. Ellen lay down beside me but I could hear her crying softly. I rolled over and told her coldly, "Don't wake the girls. You did this to yourself." Her sobbing ceased, and we lay there in silence. The next morning, I tried to get through my workday, but I was a wreck. I couldn't focus, and everyone noticed. My boss pulled me aside to ask if I was okay, but I just brushed it off, saying I felt unwell. He sent me home early to rest. But I didn't go home. I went to the gym where Nicholas worked. I had thoughts of confronting him. Hell, I even imagined beating the shit out of him. But I knew that wasn't going to solve anything. I just stood there, looking at the building, wondering how many other husbands had felt what I was feeling right now. Then I went home. When I got home, Ellen was there, looking like she'd been crying. She tried to talk, but I just ignored her, going straight to our room to sleep. That night, she tried to initiate the intimacy, but I felt nothing but disgust. The thought of touching her after everything made me nauseous. She cried, asking, "What can I do to fix this?" and tried to hug me. I pushed her away. She went to bed in tears, and I lay there, feeling empty. The next day, I was home when Chloe and Casey returned from school. They were surprised to see me so early. I told them I just wanted to spend time with my pumpkins. As I hugged them, I realized they were all I truly had left. And as I looked into their innocent faces, I knew what I needed to do. This marriage, this facade Ellen and I were keeping up, it couldn't go on. The only way forward was a divorce. It had been a few weeks since I'd found out about Ellen's affair. I'd filed for divorce and we'd been living under the same roof, but there was nothing left between us. Every time I looked at her, I felt an empty rage simmering inside me. She'd shattered the life we'd built and yet she acted as if we could somehow move past it. The only reason we were still living together was for the sake of Chloe and Casey. I was trying to keep things as normal as possible for them until the divorce was finalized. But there was nothing normal left for me. My marriage was in ruins, and I was just counting down the days until I could put it all behind me. One day, I got home from work a bit earlier than usual. As I walked through the door, I heard voices coming from the living room. I instantly recognized Ellen's voice, but the other voice made my blood run cold. Nicholas. The nerve he had to step into my home after everything he'd done. I took a few quiet steps closer, watching the scene unfold before me. Ellen was standing in front of him, her arms crossed, looking exasperated. I couldn't hear every word, but from the bits I picked up, she was saying something about ending things. Nicholas seemed irritated, pushing back like he wasn't taking no for an answer. That was the final straw. When Nicholas noticed me standing there, his face paled. He froze, clearly not expecting me to walk in. I felt months of bottled-up anger surge to the surface, and before I knew it, I charged at him. The next few minutes were a blur. My fist connected with his jaw, and he stumbled back, trying to regain his balance. He threw a punch, which I dodged, but he managed to land a second one on my side. The pain barely registered. I was too focused on making him pay for all the humiliation and betrayal I'd endured. Ellen's screams echoed around us, pleading for us to stop. She tried to pull me back, but I shoved her away, fury making my vision blur. In my house, Ellen? Really? I spat, swinging at Nicholas again. He tried to fight back, but he was no match for the pure rage driving me. Finally, the chaos drew attention from outside, and one of the neighbors must have called the cops. Within minutes, sirens blared, and officers rushed in, pulling us apart. They separated Nicholas and me, each of us bloodied and breathing hard, and I was handcuffed before I could even process what was happening. The irony didn't escape me. Here I was, the wronged husband, now being arrested in my own home because this man had the audacity to come here. As they led me out of the house, Ellen was sobbing, begging the officers not to take us both in. She kept saying it was just a misunderstanding, but that fell on deaf ears. The officers booked us both for assault, and I found myself in a small holding cell, alone with my thoughts. Nicholas had been taken to a separate cell, which was a good thing, otherwise, I might have thrown another punch if I saw his face again. Sitting alone in that cell, I had time to let the reality sink in. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it either. Everything I'd been holding back had finally erupted, and honestly, I was surprised it hadn't happened sooner. I felt trapped in a house with a woman who had destroyed our marriage and now had the gall to bring her affair partner into my home. By the time they finally released me, I was exhausted, emotionally drained and completely spent. Ellen was waiting for me outside, and I could see the shame and guilt in her eyes. But at that moment, I didn't care about her emotions or what she had to say. I just wanted to go home and figure out how to move forward. When we got home, we had to sit down with the girls and try to explain why their dad wasn't home the night before. I told them I had been caught up with grown-up problems, but I could see the worry in their eyes. It tore me apart to think that this mess was affecting them too. They didn't deserve any of this. They were my only priority, the only reason I was trying to keep things as normal as possible. Ellen tried to apologize later that night, saying she hadn't expected Nicholas to come over. She claimed she was finally ending things with him, trying to make things right, but all I could do was laugh bitterly. In our house, do you have any idea how that makes me feel? She didn't respond, just lowered her head, silent and ashamed. It was too late for explanations or apologies. I didn't want her words. I wanted my life back. A life where I didn't feel like a stranger in my own home. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I realized that I was done with this half-life we were both pretending to live. I couldn't stomach another day of sharing a house with her, pretending that we could somehow get through this. Chloe and Casey deserved a father who wasn't drowning in anger and betrayal. I made up my mind. I'd talk to my lawyer and finalize everything as soon as possible. I would make sure I was there for my girls, but as for Ellen, she was no longer my concern. It was time to let go of the anger, to move on, and to focus on what truly mattered. My daughters, my peace, and rebuilding a life that was mine alone. After that night, everything moved quickly. Ellen and I put the house up for sale and agreed to split the profits. It was a bitter end to what we'd once built together, but I wanted to move on without any ties to the life we had shared. My only focus now was on my daughters, Chloe and Casey. They were the ones who mattered, and I was determined to give them stability, even if our world had been turned upside down. When the house sold, I packed up my things, along with the girls' belongings, and moved in with my parents until I could find a place of my own. Chloe and Casey had made it clear they wanted to stay with me, and I couldn't blame them. They barely spoke to Ellen after everything that happened, and I didn't push it. This was their choice, and it reflected the hurt they were feeling. Settling in with my parents was an adjustment for all of us, but they welcomed us with open arms. They adored Chloe and Casey, and in a way, it felt like a second chance to give my girls the warmth and security they needed. My parents stepped up, looking after the girls while I was at work. Having their support during this time was a relief I couldn't put into words. Each night, I came home to the girls waiting for me, eager to share stories about their day. My parents made an effort to keep their spirits up, taking them to the park, baking treats together, and helping them with their homework. For the first time in weeks, I saw genuine smiles on Chloe and Casey's faces, and it gave me hope that we could rebuild. Ellen reached out regularly, wanting to see the girls. I agreed to set up visitation, but I kept things civil and detached. There was no trust left, no lingering attachment. I was polite, and I respected her role as their mother, but that was it. For the girls though, it was a different story. They struggled with their feelings toward her. They were confused, hurt, and unsure of how to act around her. I knew it would take time, and I reminded them that they didn't have to have all the answers right now. There were moments when I'd catch Chloe or Casey looking lost, as if the weight of what happened was finally settling in. I made sure to be there for them, whether they needed to talk or just wanted a quiet moment together. Once the dust settled, I started looking for a place of my own. I wanted to give my daughters a home where they felt they truly belonged, somewhere we could create new memories without the shadow of the past hanging over us. It wasn't easy to find a place within my budget that felt right, but eventually, I did. It was a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter part of town, with a small park nearby. The girls were excited to decorate their new room, and seeing their enthusiasm reminded me that we were on the path to healing. Our new life was quieter, simpler. We no longer had a big house or a fancy neighborhood, but we had each other, and that was enough. I won't pretend this story has a happy ending. Life didn't magically get easier. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I could have done something differently. But I've come to realize that this was just a chapter in my life, a painful, unforgettable chapter, but not the whole story. For Chloe and Casey, the adjustment was gradual. They missed the familiarity of our old home, the neighborhood friends, even the routines we once had. But they adjusted, finding new friends at school and settling into our apartment. They still saw Ellen on occasion, and I could see that they were slowly beginning to rebuild a relationship with her, on their own terms. I stayed out of it, letting them take the lead. Looking back, I know I'll always feel a sting when I think about what happened. Ellen and I had built a life together and she threw it away. But I can't live in that bitterness. I have 2 daughters who need me to be present, to be the best father I can be. They've already lost so much, I'm not going to let them lose more because of my anger. I don't know if this is a happy ending or a sad one. Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just life, messy and complicated, with no clear lines between right and wrong, happy and sad. But I do know this, I'm learning to let go.